and welcome to this episode of Community Connections, airing right here on OROMIA11. I am your host, Anna Orr, and today we will be talking to St. Paul City Council member Anika Bowie, and she is the representative of Ward 1 in the city of St. Paul. We're going to talk a little bit about lawmaking and policy. We're going to talk about community engagement, representation, and a few other things. This is going to be a good episode you won't want to miss. Welcome to this episode of Community Connections, Councilmember Bowie. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to share a little bit about what's going on in Ward 1 and hopefully shine a light on what's going on across St. Paul and what's going on a little bit federally so that viewers have a better grasp on what's happening and what we should be paying attention to, and then hopefully how we can lend ourselves.
Absolutely.
Now, currently in January 2024, St. Paul, Minnesota made history by inaugurating its first all-female city council and almost all women of color. How has that experience been, and what can you tell us about the work that's happening?
It's been remarkable. When I first stepped into public service or had an interest for it, in this capacity, never did I think that I would be making history. I just was a girl from Rondo who had like a heart to serve people and been doing it for all of my life. And to step into a position where now I have 6 other women, and majority women of color alongside of me, who are deeply rooted in their communities and like looking to serve. I've learned so much. I feel the weight of the responsibility of this position, alongside defining the narrative of what it means for like women, particularly Black women and women of color, to be in these positions, and how we pave ways. And we have always paved ways. And women have always been pioneering, innovative, and in so many ways, whether technology, inventions, even in leadership, or even at home, at home raising kids. So it's been an honor to like demonstrate that in this early time. I've learned so much around my colleagues, particularly around, places and areas alongside, St. Paul. I've been able to really, educate my colleagues too around just like the issues that we face in Ward 1 and the opportunities. One of the things that I feel like is more exciting is we really have been shifting the way we approach issues. For so long, the greater public's always told like there's a scarcity, there's never enough, or we could only help so many people. And there's a reality to that when we think about, the tangible like services. But I really appreciate how this council and within my time here has been instrumental with being more innovative and reimagining just what our role is. Yes, there's a city charter that defines that. But for so many people who know us or know me as a little girl growing up and just see me in this position, I just see that there's so much more in ways that we can help our people here.
I think representation matters because it is proof that we exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see someone like you, who is from your community, from the Rondo area, being able to speak truth to power is so important. Now, switching gears just a little bit, can you talk about what immigrant communities know or should know about the role and impact of the city government in their day-to-day lives, and how we can encourage civic engagement? I think people sometimes get so overwhelmed. We choose to get detached from
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. And we know that that is not always safe for us to do.
Yeah. It's especially the role of city government, I think, is an endless opportunity to continue educating our communities, particularly our immigrant communities, because when I think about the spaces that we often see our immigrant communities and how they get connected to services or connected to employment, if they want to have a dream of, building a business, or they just want to just like get immersed, in their new home. I think about our like public libraries being that space. That is a public good that the city provides. And as a city council member, my role on the city council is to ensure that our public spaces remain public. And that creates opportunities for people who want to learn how to use a computer or learn how to read different books, and making sure that the books that are there are representative of a larger immigrant community. And also, not only is it learning is a one-way street, I think about my role on city council is to also be that channel, that vessel really, to where I can hear about ways that we can expand and the ways that we are actually servicing, particularly the Romo community. I think about our parks and recs, and our families who use our parks and spaces for like community just gatherings, like bringing their food or showing up for their child who may play on like a football team or soccer or basketball. And just like where we think about where joy exists, where family exists, is often in these public spaces, which is like ran in and operated by the city. Also, government is not in silos. It shouldn't function in silos. So even on a city level, we still have a pathway and we're a route to like the county services. We can be the supports that get you connected to your congresswoman or your state rep or your senator. So I think often that like the city is kind of like the first stop for many people, and we're such in close proximity with the people on a day to day. If you want to open up a business in the city of St. Paul, you go through through the city, and you could go through your city council member to learn about all the different laws that's connected to the business that you want to open up. If you want to just make sure that you have like a good quality water, that's ran by the city. If you want to know, like, how do you throw away your trash, all these things is goes through the city. So I really love local policies, just because it's really the closest like proximity to people's day-to-day lives here in St. Paul.
Now, you have such a large Oromo constituency in St. Paul in Ward 1. How are you all actively engaging your community?
Well, when I think about the engagement with the community, I have like really, I would say, like the fortune to where um, I came up within my community. I didn't come into this position having to now like find community. I had the honor to be uplifted and supported and brought into this position because literally of the Oromo community trusting me, informing me, educating me, bringing me into space, and just seeing this vehicle as a way to support the work that they're doing. But when I think about just the function of my office and making sure that if it's not me, if it's someone in the future, or even like other offices in St. Paul, that we use this opportunity to really highlight and recognize the Romo community, and bring visibility most importantly to them. And on the city level, I had the honor last year during Aroma Week to do a resolution and recognizing the over 80,000 Oromo people that live in St. Paul. And for some of my colleagues, it was like the first time. Um, and I think about just the milestones that are made in terms of like how a Roma community is shown through our community center that's in the heart of Ward 1. A few years ago, had the opportunity to be at the opening of the East African elementary school in the heart of Frogtown, and um, I was excited for the young people, but also the little girl in me was so excited because it was like, wow, you get to see, images of brown women and girls and like children from all different walks of life, and just see that representation was magnifying because it was also showing us that the distance, the oceans, or the history between us is not enough, and that through education is how we can get closer together. Through education is how we build richer communities. So I make it a thing that like every year or whenever they need me, to be in those places. And if you know anything, particularly around just when we think about communities of color, immigrant communities, they're on you, right? They're gonna call you. They are very relational. And I grew up in a very relational way, so it's been it's been fascinating to really just like see how you implement a relational way of engaging with community in a structure that is very rigid, right? And like you got the 9 to 5, and it has really strong boundaries, particularly around how it actually corresponds, right? But in this last year, it's been really evolving for me, particularly around like how am I showing up and how am I receiving the concerns, the celebrations, the requests from a community that is highly relational, right? And ensure that the city also thinks about that when it's coming up with policies or services for the community.
I remember seeing you at the Asfana Festival and coming out with the people during Aroma Week and making sure that you were having a touchstone within the community in a really important way. And I know that it's important for us all to lean in, but it's beautiful to see a civic leader step up and say, I'm doing more than paying lip service to the community. I'm here amongst you, and you can come and share your concerns, but also talk to me about the joys of your community too, and celebrate with everyone.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to me about the specific initiatives the city is taking to ensure that minority community voices are represented in policymaking?
Absolutely. When I think about just, how specific steps and ways that we're ensuring like our community voices, I want to push back a little bit just because just respectfully, just around, I think about just the framing when it comes to like minority businesses. And I think about in my role, I have to listen to a really large, diverse set of communities. And, often when we have like this prejudged notion of a community being a minority or not being represented, I often resonate with my lived experience being from Rondo, right, which was demolished, destroyed because of like, institutions or policymakers seeing, these communities as a minority or less than, or didn't have any power, didn't have any say, didn't have any voice. And so I like am very, very like proactive and intentional to lead with equity first. and also think about like the historical nature that comes from the decisions that we're making. And like one of the things that's really been highlighted, has highlighted that notion is when the council was making a really, really critical vote that was high stakes, where we were passing what was called administrative citations,
Okay.
which essentially means that the city was creating an enforcement tool for individuals or entities that did not follow city laws, policies, codes, ordinances. And you would think like that makes sense. Like government goes through all these steps to create laws to protect people. We want to make sure they actually have strong enforcement. And I am supportive of that because I truly believe that like if we have a law that says you have to pay someone, affordable or livable wage, that these businesses all throughout St. Paul should be honoring that. For example, if you are a landlord and you are providing housing, but yet, you don't have any functioning, appliances or like running water or heat, the city, that's the role where the city comes in and actually enforces and making sure that people are abiding by that. So there's all those reasons of why it's important. But from my experience, especially not only from Rondo, but as a former vice president of a branch in the Twin Cities of NAACP, we always know sometimes the intentions that go into a law doesn't actually show up in the outcomes. And how it's implemented can have negative consequences for communities, primarily for communities of color, and primarily for communities that don't have resources and may not even know about these new laws, or may not even, just like I mentioned, not even have resources. So
Right.
one of the things through my office, we made sure to actually create a legislative advisory committee that leads with equity. So give people who have lived experience on this committee to actually create a tool, the enforcement tool that's able to distinguish who's unwilling to abide by our laws and who's just like unable,
Mm-hmm.
whether like whatever, like age, seniority, ability, language, our socioeconomic background. There's so many things. So where, from my experience on the council, where I've seen people come before us and have shared like, well, cried, literally saying like my house caught on fire. I didn't have home insurance, but now that my house caught on fire, I'm out of compliance of the St. Paul's housing code. I have a distressed building. Or seniors who lived in St. Paul for like over 50, 60 years, avid gardeners, or like planted pollinators in their boulevard, and the city, like has a really strict lens on how it actually upkeeps our boulevards, and removes those things, and like that's a big uproar to where something where like the enforcement and implementation of our policy has to actually be centered in like the people that we serve. And oftentimes, the people that we serve don't know that they have a voice. And so that's like really the role that I'm most passionate about is, whether it's, something as simple as, the boulevard, or something as crucial and serious as like your place of your home. I think it's important that people are always talking and get to know their city council member, and that their city council member is like their biggest advocate and their biggest voice.
I think that committee is so important because it's holding people accountable, but also starting to, like you said, talk to the people that are willing, and then the
Yes.
people that aren't able. Everyone is not trying to give any pushback, but some of us just aren't able to,
Yeah.
because of whatever life circumstances is, to be in compliance.
Yes, absolutely.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about immigration and ICE raids. We know that that's been in mainstream media, and we've heard so much coming down from President Donald Trump about what's taking place. And I just want to ask you about how is President Trump's extreme policies impacting BIPOC and historically marginalized communities, and what can we actually do to help?
Hmm. I think, anyone who's paying attention now, it's just the anxiety that is just thick in the air. The fear, now is it's fear that's just in our face, it's fear that's like in our bones or a lot of people who's impacted. And I also think about just the dangerous impacts of what once was someone's words and ideology on a campaign trail now being demonstrated through executive orders. And what does that mean? The first, 20, 30, or now we're like in the 40s, if people want to keep counting, with Trump's office, there's been like a lot of devastation, and it put us, particularly in local governments and the state governments, in a place of uncertainty, where people are in a place of trying to even measure what the impact is while the harm is still happening, while things are just like changing rapidly. I would say what that means for my role particularly is to provide peace and provide assurance, like times 10, and to like not back down to the values that once might have felt like responsive in a time of crisis, but now it needs to be like embedded in the culture and the fabric of our government. And I think, especially Minnesota and St. Paul, which are sanctuary cities, and we stood up, and this time is not new; it's very familiar. And what I think at this point is now like, okay, we don't have the luxury of like, okay, we'll say we're sanctuary, but we'll just hope that Trump doesn't come back. Like, no, now it's not even Trump. It's more so of the machinery that's behind, any elected position that wants to remove people's rights, remove people's ability to be treated as human, and totally isolate people's ability to take care of themselves and their families and have access to the same things that we all like need to survive, and to live. So, and when it comes to just the position, it's already been out there in the news. The city of St. Paul, the state of Minnesota has joined a joint lawsuit against President Trump, particularly for the executive orders that has compromised the DEI policies and investments. And part of that lawsuit is stating that this is retaliatory in nature, to where he has made known that he will not only strip funding from cities that have sanctuary policies, but he will target those cities. And before we could even wait around to figure out what the magnitude of that is, I really appreciate our leadership, with State Attorney General Keith Ellison, and our county attorneys across the state. I know particularly in the metro area, County Attorney John Choi and County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who have stood firmly and publicly saying that this is a place where immigrants will remain safe. At the local level, there is still, that pathway of hope for our immigrant families who are seeking citizenship. And we provide those services. We provide those services in our libraries, in our rec centers. We are continue as a council to invest into that. Especially now looking at ways to expand. So people who are here and have families and they go to our schools and they are in our place of worship. They're in our, we want to normalize that pathway for them to be permanent citizens here. So they don't have to, be like active contributors, but yet always looking behind their back, right? We saw that a few years ago on the state level with the Minnesota driver's license policy that passed that gave people who are seeking citizenship or, undocumented the access to have a driver's license so they can get to point A and B safely. And I think as much as the danger that is amongst us, it's also a very pivotal time to actually like protect what we have and not take for granted. The leadership that's here in Minnesota that really is like carrying the baton, when it comes to democracy, when it comes to also being the voice for our immigrant communities. And I think that's shown through our diversity. So where, when we think about who's represented in these seats of power and justice and advocacy, it is our immigrant community that is using their lived experience to pave the way for more to come.
Lastly, about this specific subject, what do you feel we can do as neighbors, as community members to support one another as we're navigating this time? Because I know there are hotlines and things where you can report people that you may deem to be illegal and calling ICE and things of that nature. But I feel like for every person that feels like that, there are legions of others that are saying, I'm not willing to participate. And I want my community neighbors to know I'm with you and I'm not going to support you and your family being destabilized.
Mm-hmm. I think this is time now to become more educated. And like educated through the way of like curiosity to want to learn to help. And then also when I think about just you put it like perfectly, just like how do we help our neighbors? And often politics, it when we think about it in like a political way, like we need to really just strip down like I just feel like the barriers around just how we talk about really just helping our neighbors. And it's like the golden rule. And, I think this is really more so a fight for humanity more than just the fight around like the boundaries and who can be on what side, of the river, or who could even be on which side of the aisle, politically. I think we need to really start ministering the truth that we have way more in common than we do differently. And the things that we care about, what makes us happy, what makes us sad. We go through grief. We all have had an experience of losing someone, right? And we are dealing with a loss of trust. We're dealing with a loss of security. We're dealing a loss of community safety, even within our own homes. And that's not just only isolated to immigrant or a person who, may not have got here in the same way that our European immigrants, have was received here. And so I think there's education. I think there's a lot of wellness and heart work that needs to be done. think this is really a time for like the truth speakers to stand up. We've been seeing it a lot, particularly in our faith leadership. We're now more than ever seeing, pastors preaching and making it very known that this is a place where love is going to remain and exist. When on the public level, in our libraries, we doubled down and made sure that the mantra of this is a place for everybody is true in its essence, and that and also there needs to be more trainings. I think organizers and advocates and our organizations who like deeply rooted institutions and even like the emerging ones need to train people on what to do if you see someone being approached by ICE, what to do if you see, ICE or unidentified law enforcement or even person, enter a public space. And one of the things that's been, we've been in conversations of is making sure to respond and not react. And that we need to know who are the chain of communication, and that even now more than ever, that our data is not to just be like open and available to anyone. You know your rights. If you are not being detained, you need to ensure that you're utilizing your Fifth Amendment, and you don't have to speak with law enforcement unless you are detained or they have a warrant. And so education is key of our constitutional rights, but also what's really important is courage. And I say this a lot, but having the courage to know that you are doing the right thing and you are making a difference, and that even stepping up and giving someone assurance that they belong will go a long way. And lastly, I watched the Stephen Colbert show, and it was the day of the election, and because you have to have some type of outlet, to deal with a lot of this. And one of the things they mentioned on the show was that with the Trump election, we're going to see a lot of health impacts, particularly in our abdominal. And when we think about just like the stress, the time, there's the stress, there's the anxiety. Now more than ever, it's so important to protect our mental health. And I think about this often, not only in like my personal capacity as a leader, as a public servant, but also just like the mental health of the people that we're serving, and normalizing more resources that create safe havens for people in our public spaces. And that needs to extend beyond just just our faith places, our hospitals, but that needs to be normalized in our businesses, in our culture, in our fabric of how we make sure we protect public spaces for our communities.
Now, I'm going to throw a lob at you right quick, but I think it's important. How are you actively taking care of yourself as you navigate the concerns of your ward, but also the community at large?
I have to keep things always in perspective. I stand tall on, many of my ancestors and women before me who've been in this space. I stay courageous, and I also, I make sure I stay hydrated, because being a public servant, I'm literally a vessel to the people. And if I'm not good, then, I'm not able to actually serve. I'm not able to show up. So, for me, it's important that, I'm eating healthy. I'm living a lifestyle that is going to be substantial, but not substantial, so sustaining, a sustaining lifestyle in community. I think the biggest thing is making sure we're not in isolation. And that's what we're all like, what we're all fighting for, is to like build community and build those relationships. And a lot of the issues and challenges is because people are not tethered to each other in ways that organically used to happen, right? When you have communities that aren't like uprooted, right? When you have communities that aren't in a constant displacement. So just making sure people are like remaining to the core. I'm like, my blessings have came from being connected in the arts. So I always have to have a creative outlet for myself. And I always have to think about just not in this moment, but just like generations to come. And, just making sure that like I'm not just serving for this term. I am serving for a legacy for other people to be inspired by, and to continue like going down that path of making sure we're ministering about, well, I say ministering, but like highlighting, promoting healthy lifestyle is so important. And it doesn't just end in the doctor's office. It's holistic. It's everywhere. It's in your relationships. It's in your place of worship, and it's also in your public spaces like your libraries.
Wonderful. Let our viewers know how to stay connected to the work you are doing at the St. Paul City Council with Ward 1.
Yeah, well, you can always find me in Ward 1. I'm at City Hall, but I'm really accessible. So I do have a social media accounts. I have an Instagram, St. Paul Ward 1, a Facebook page as well. We host community events really often. I'm really excited for this summer, where we're going to have tons of community festivals. Like I mentioned, like you can always set up a virtual meeting, or we can meet in person. I often do office hours at Flavor Cafe off of Dell University. So, but yeah, I'm always here. And like I mentioned, before, even people can invite me. So please invite me if you want to just send an email. Or you can call my office. My staff is phenomenal. They're really welcoming and accommodating when it comes to making sure I can get something on the books for people.
I definitely speak to that they very much so are accommodating and are quite helpful. And it is wonderful to see you, not just as a Minneapolis resident, but someone out in the community that's really doing the work.
Resident. Wait.
Well, before I'm a Minneapolis resident, and so to see you out in the community before, we had the honor to have you on this program. So thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to be here. I hope it's not my last time here. I definitely want to, make sure this is an ongoing conversation. So it's been an honor, and I've been seeing just like how you grow and how you're just like expanding, really with the show and the audience to everyone across the globe.
Thank you.
And thank you for just like having this platform, and I'm making sure that the voices of leadership is heard.
I think it's important, and I thank you for joining me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anika Bowie, and I proudly serve as a St. Paul City Councilwoman of St. Paul of Ward 1. And Ward 1 represents Frogtown, Summit University, North End, in the Midway area. I'm here to share with you that we have some grant opportunities with the City of St. Paul. One of those grants is our commercial corridor, where we're going to be allocating over $1.2 million of grant funds. If you have a business or a business association that's alongside a commercial corridor, think about University Avenue, Selby Avenue, or Grand. You can apply to those funds. They will be made available via our website. Also, another grant opportunity is we have our cultural star in our neighborhood start. So if you have a business or organization or a nonprofit that invests in the arts or celebrates the culture or food, you can apply for these funds. We have about over $3.4 million worth of funds where you can apply around March of 2025 and get an opportunity to fund your initiative. So it's really important that we're promoting the arts and that we're building the community. So those dollars are for you to utilize and grow your community and make sure that we have a vibrant community here in St. Paul.
Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for this episode of Community Connections. A very special thank you to St. Paul City Council member Anika Bowie and her amazing team at Ward 1. Please make sure that you stay connected to the work she is doing in St. Paul by contacting her directly, as well as following on her social media to keep up abreast of what's going on in the city of St. Paul. As always, I am your host, Anna Orr, and this has been a wonderful episode of Community Connections. I look forward to connecting again with you soon.
imaluudhaaf karoora qabdanii imaluudhaaf karoora qabaattaniif dhibee gifiraa yaadachuu hin dagatinaa. Imala keessan irraa yeroo deebitan yaadannoo gaarii malee dhibee gifiraa fudhattanii hin deebi'inaa. Imalaan duratti isinii fi maatii keessaniif talaalli MMR dabalatee talaalliiwwan barbaachisan kan akka ta'an baruuf ogeessa fayyaa keessan dubbisaa. Imalarraa deebitanii torban 3 keessatti mallattoolee akka laydaa yookiin dhaqna gubaa fi madaa diimatee qaamatti isin bahu yoo ofirratti argitaniif doktora keessanitti bilbiluun mallattoolee fi iddoo itti maltanii turtan ibsaa fi dhibeen gifiraa akka hin fafacaaneef wal gargaarree haa ittisnu. Waa'ee dhibee kanaa gadi fageenyaan baruuf immoo www.health.state.mn.us/disease/measles/basics.html haa daawwannu.